Hey, welcome back. My name is Derek Main. I am doing a video today outside. It's a beautiful, kind of idyllic spring day. The birds were going crazy a minute ago, which is why I wanted to be out here, and now they've seemed to have settled down. Maybe you can hear them. I kind of like that. I like that audience though, right? I like an audience of birds. I actually hate the spring. I agree with T.S. Eliot's thing there about April is the cruelest month. Part of it is, what you can't see here is everything is kind of suffused and covered with this layer of yellow dust that is the devil's dust. So that's not good. And then the other aspect is that winter is, it's a time of hibernation and reflection. It's a dark, heavy time. I'm probably suited to that in some ways. But it also happens that every time I come out of one of those periods, I feel like I'm not ready yet. It's like spring is when everything opens up, it blooms, there's new beginnings. And I'm always like, hey, I'm back here, man. I haven't figured out yet how I want to be, how I want to approach this season. And so this year it feels even more so like that because we're sort of being asked to reintegrate back into a society after, a year plus of not being. And that's difficult. It takes a lot of energy for many of us. And I'm feeling some of that now. So today I'm going to talk not about a book, but only actually about one poem. And the poem, I'm going to screw up names here, I'm sorry, but the poem is from Nicanor Parra's Antipoems, New and Selected. This is edited by David Unger, and it's a New Directions release. A lot of translators here, but the names are so impressive and good that I got to list them. But these poems are translated by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg, Edith Grossman, James Laughlin, Patricia Lerzundi, Thomas Merton, W.S. Merwin, Paul Pines, George Quasha, Sandra Reyes, Hardy St. Martin, William J. Smith, Lynn Van Voorhees, Miller Williams, William Carlos Williams, and then the editor who we mentioned, David Unger. So Spanish is on one side, and then English is on the other side, which is really cool. I love it when editions do that. There was a Reiki that did that recently that Open Letter put out, so I really dig that. And he's a great poet. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of Parra. This is my first reading of his. I'm not as well versed, no pun intended, in poetry as I am in novels and in fiction, because that's just sort of my first obsession. But I definitely look to poetry, and I've been looking to poetry a little more lately as a means to understand the world. I did want to briefly, so I decided to get this because I was watching a Roberto Bolaño interview on YouTube. It was from the Chilean International Book Festival in 1999. He's being interviewed, up on a stage, and it's all in Spanish, but YouTube has these auto-generated English captions, and I don't know. How good are those? I have no idea, but he's asked, the interviewer, I'm looking at some notes because I wanted to mention this part, but the interviewer is Christian Workin. He's asked, what is poetry, right? Which, that sucks to be asked that, because that's not a question that, the interviewer was pretty good though. And I think it's more it's one of those questions where the concept is can you please just talk about poetry for a minute? But instead of saying that, you have to have a frame. There's no answer to that works, whatnot. But I'm gonna read you what Bolaño says as translated by the YouTube closed captioning thing. Poetry is you. That is the answer. Well, I think the answer is such a foolishness, but I think is the only possible answer. I don't know what is poetry. I don't know. I know who wear close of the poetic phenomenon. For me, Rimbaud and Lautréamont, they are still poets par excellence. For me, Rimbaud and Lautréamont is the way of poetry. And in that sense, for me, the poetry is an act. Who have a lot is a gesture more than an act of teenager, of the fragile teenager, innocuous, who bet his few possessions for something that we don't know what it is, and it generally lost the bet. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because I love that ending, and that feels and rings extremely true of most artistic endeavors. You know, the bet of a fragile teenager, generally going to lose the bet, right? 99 times out of 100. But it feels like there's no other option. You know, I really relate to that. But anyway, he talks about Parra in that interview. So that got me down that rabbit hole. I posted on Twitter, where I'm much more active. I know that I should be better about being active here. I will try. I get so self-conscious when I make these videos that I honestly take YouTube off my phone for 2 days and kind of like try not to think about it, because I'm not natural in this. This is not natural to me. So anyway, that's why I'm probably not as good at responding to stuff every time someone says anything on one of my channels, or one of my channels. Well, I have one. What am I, like a gamer? Yeah, I have a side gamer channel where I'm Fortnite. No. If anytime anybody makes a comment on any of my videos on my channel, it means the world to me. And like, if you like do that whole, thank you. But I will admit I'm not as present as I should or could be. And sorry for my finger, but I had to get rid of this notification thing because that was driving me crazy. Like some work thing. I'm not doing some work thing. Not right now. I mean, so Parra. So I posted on Twitter, where I'm much more active about reading Parra, and got some really great stories. And people love him. I don't know why I've never read it, but I'm really happy today to talk only about one poem. And this poem is The Vices of the Modern World. And so, as I said, you got the Spanish and the English. This is 4 pages. And initially, I made a video where I talked about the poem. I did it just 5 minutes ago. So right before I'm doing this right now, I just made one. And I didn't like it. And like, I'm trying to do this because what I'm reading right now is Leaves of Grass. And I really want to make something. I really want to make a video. I really want to talk about it. I want to express myself with it. And so I'm trying to learn how to discuss and talk about poetry. I don't have a background in any of this. This isn't like, this is just a fan, you know, like talking. It's not, so sometimes I'll feel like stupid or inadequate or whatnot. And that's kind of how I felt when I was just discussing this poem. So I thought, instead, I'm going to give a brief intro to it, why I love it so much, what it is about it, and then I'm just going to read the poem. I think that's okay. If it makes, I mean, Parra is dead. He's not going to get mad. But New Directions, or, I mean, I don't know if, so the translator of this particular poem is W.S. Merwin. I don't think he'd get mad, right? It's cool, right? It's got to be. It has to be. Oh, and there's Bolaño on the back. I never noticed that, but it says the best living Spanish language poet. And Neruda's on the back too, and I don't think he liked Neruda. We know Bolaño didn't, so that's funny. He's also got one of the great names in the literature of our language. I love this stuff. I mean, I'm blown away. So before I read it, so here's the thing about this poem. I mean, this guy would have fit in perfectly with today's scene. Caustic, funny, finding poetry in the everyday, some everyday language, you know, absolutely brilliant. But this particular poem, I really like because it is what it says. It's the vices of the modern world. And it's a beautifully realized sort of summation of the pain, the suffering, and the futility of each of those things that we find ourselves thrust into when we're born here in the modern world. But it has a prescription, and it's a prescription that I happen to fully agree with, so that helps a lot. And that prescription is sort of similar to Sisyphus and rolling the ball up the hill, where Camus says we have to imagine him happy. And I think this is more so the sense of you have to force yourself. You have to find where you can those bits. This is where I screwed up trying to talk about it earlier, because this is just what I took from it. There's hundreds of other interpretations, and I think it'll be better if I just read it. And then from there, hopefully you find an interpretation. Hopefully it'll make you want to go out and get the book, because there's many, many more like it. And I think it's tremendous. Some of the language here, amazing. The vices of the modern world. Modern delinquents are authorized to convene daily in parks and gardens. Equipped with powerful binoculars and pocket watches, they break into kiosks favored by death and install their laboratories among the rose bushes in full flower. From there, they direct the photographers and beggars that roam the neighborhood, trying to raise a small temple to misery, and if they get a chance, having some woebegone shoeshine boy. The cowed police run from these monsters, making for the middle of town, where the great year's end fires are breaking out, and a hooded hero is robbing two nuns at gunpoint. The vices of the modern world, the motor car and the movies, racial discrimination, the extermination of the Indian, the manipulations of high finance, the catastrophe of the aged, the clandestine white slave trade carried on by international sodomites, self-advertisement and gluttony, expensive funerals, personal friends of His Excellency, the elevation of folklore to a spiritual category, the abuse of soporifics and philosophy, the softening up of men favored by fortune, autoeroticism and sexual cruelty, the exaltation of the study of dreams and the subconscious to the detriment of common sense, the exaggerated faith in serums and vaccines, the deification of the phallus, the international spread legs policy patronized by the reactionary press, the unbounded lust for power and money, the gold rush, the fatal dollar dance, speculation and abortion, the destruction of idols, overdevelopment of dietetics and pedagogical psychology, the vices of dancing, of the cigarette, of games of chance, the drops of blood that are often found on the sheets of newlyweds, the madness for the sea, agoraphobia and claustrophobia, the disintegration of the atom, the gory humor of the theory of relativity, the frenzy to return to the womb, the cult of the exotic, airplane accidents, incinerations, mass purges, retention of passports, all this just because to produce vertigo, dream analysis, and the spread of radiomania. As has been demonstrated, the modern world is composed of artificial flowers, grown under bell jars like death. It is made of movie stars and blood-smeared boxers fighting by moonlight, and nightingale men controlling the economic lives of the nations with certain easily explained devices. Usually they are dressed in black like precursors of autumn, and eat roots and wild herbs. Meanwhile, the wise, gnawed by rats, rot in the crypts of cathedrals, and souls with the slightest nobility are relentlessly persecuted by the police. The modern world is an enormous sewer. The chic restaurants are stuffed with digesting corpses and birds flying dangerously low. That's not all. The hospitals are full of impostors, to say nothing of those heirs of the spirit who found colonies in the anus of each new surgical case. Modern industrialists occasionally suffer from the effects of the poisoned atmosphere. They are stricken at their sewing machines by the terrifying sleeping sickness, which eventually turns them into angels of a sort. They deny the existence of the physical world and brag about being poor children of the grave, and yet the world has always been like this. Truth, like beauty, is neither created nor lost, and poetry is in things themselves, or is merely a mirage of the spirit. I admit that a well-planned earthquake can wipe out a city rich in traditions in a matter of seconds, and that a meticulous aerial bombardment smashes trees, horses, thrones, music, but what does it matter? If, while the world's greatest ballerina is dying, poor and abandoned, in a village in southern France, spring restores to man a few of the vanished flowers. What I say is, let's try to be happy, sucking on the miserable human rib. Let's extract from it the restorative liquid, each one following his personal inclinations. Let's cling to the divine table scrap, panting and trembling. Let's suck those lips that drive us wild. The lot is cast. Let's breathe in this enervating and destructive perfume. And for one more day, live the life of the elect. Out of his armpits, man extracts the wax he needs to mold the faces of his idols, and out of woman's sex, the straw and the mud for his temples. Therefore, I grow a louse on my tie and smile at the imbeciles descending from the trees. So let's try to be happy. What does it all matter if a ballerina in southern France is starving? Oh, God. It's just... I know why I messed up earlier. I know why I messed up. I know why people mess up when they try to discuss poetry, because they try to discuss poetry. I'll be back next time with Leaves of Grass, where I'm going to try to discuss poetry.